everyone, welcome to the Queerness Diaries. I'm back this week with Joe Federico again, and we're going to be talking all about chosen family, the importance of having friendships with members of our community, and how we've utilized that with our own journeys as well, because we've definitely been on, in many ways, a lot of us go on the same journey at different points. There's a lot of differences as well. So I'm very happy to have you here again today, Joe, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Connor. I mean, it's just an honor being here again this week, speaking with you about these very important conversations and hopefully touching some lives along the way. So, another journey together. Here we go. Buckle up.
Yeah, definitely. And we've touched on this before, but we met through LinkedIn. Like a
We
lot
did.
of the people that find this podcast have either found it through LinkedIn or some people through YouTube as well. But it's crazy in the world we live in now with how technology has evolved, even since COVID, like the changes in a lot of the social media platforms, groups, and ways to meet people. And I think we're similar in many senses that we use on a personal level social media, LinkedIn, to connect with a lot of people, and those connections can blossom into friendships along the way. But I think for us, it'd be good to kind of go all the way back with our stories as well in terms of finding ourselves and community. So for you, do you remember your very first gay friend or queer friend in your life? Um, who was it to you, and are you still close with them now, or it was? I guess there's a whole story in that, right?
Oh, how much time do we have, Connor?
Yeah.
But I do remember my first gay friend. I remember even before we each came out, respectively, we were friends in actually grade school. And this was in the 90s, not to date myself. I look fabulous, thank you. But it was a long time ago. And in
Yeah.
hindsight, we reconnected several times throughout middle school and high school and even after college because we ran in similar circles at the clubs, in the community. But we each took very different approaches to who we were as individuals and as gay men.
Yeah.
And I was more of the reserved, you know,
Yeah.
gentleman, not to that I'm better than anybody else, but he was more of the flamboyant type. And I respect that, especially as I'm working through my own internalized homophobia and
Yeah.
becoming friends with different people in our community, trans, queer, gay men, all of the above. And
Yeah.
I do remember, being also, you know, enthralled by what he was doing with his life before I even came out. And he
Yeah.
kind of held that candle for me in a different way, encouraging me to come out. And I wasn't
Yeah.
ready. And then I met him at clubs and we had all the same kinds of friends. Again, we ran in similar circles, especially at the clubs, because that's family too, in a way,
Yeah,
releasing
definitely.
your energy and really living your true self for a few hours at the very, least. But we're not friends anymore. And that was just because time passes and happens. And,
Yeah,
we ran
circumstances.
out of exactly, different circumstances. But in hindsight, he was a true leader for me, back in the 90s, early 2000s, when
Yeah.
I really didn't know who I was, which was interesting. So
Yeah, it's funny because at that age, like when we're finding ourselves, we're looking for fellow people we can find that connection with, but it comes with so much fear and risk. And a lot of that risk as well is opening the conversation and feeling safe enough to be like, I'm gay too, you know? I
yeah,
remember for
yeah,
me, like, I've said this before, but there were gay people at my school. They got bullied horrendously, and I
yes,
hid it, like myself, to protect myself. And I wasn't comfortable. I had my own internalized homophobia, I
sure.
guess, because even I'd say I was 25 when I had my first proper gay friend when I moved to Madrid. But prior to that, it was always, I don't know, fear when I was around other gay men of possibly not even being outed, but it's like I was so used to masking and not being able to be myself that it was very uncomfortable for me. And so,
Sure.
yet in an ironic way, like my three closest friends from school were lesbians, had my lesbian army around me, and they
Yeah.
really supported me through those years that were very stressful, like from 16 to 25, where I was navigating coming
I
out, then
know.
going back into the closet, then
Yes.
only getting glimpses into the life I wanted. And those
Yes.
glimpses would be going with my lesbian friends on the train to Manchester and going out for the weekend and then going back to reality on
Yes.
Monday and work. And then there was a gay guy who I was friendly with in work, but friendly out of fear that I've touched on before, fear of him outing me to people in work.
Yes.
It was a very unsafe environment to be myself. So I couldn't commit properly to friendships, I think, in my mind at that age, because I had an idea of who I was, but I couldn't show it because it came with it's always a risk of consequence with your queerness when you know, entrust that in someone else when you're in a fairly small town, I think.
Sure.
But in those environments, I very much hit myself. So I feel like only in the last 9, 10 years since I moved to Spain have I been able to be around the community. And for
Sure.
me, the concept of a chosen family, building these friendships around me, it's very important now because I think for many of us in the queer community, what tends to happen is as we start to get older, we do compare ourselves to our straight friends, for example, and we're
Sure.
watching
Hmm.
people
Hmm.
that got to grow up at, and there is no normal rate, if you know what I mean, but they got to sort of grow up and experience all the things they wanted to in life and were meant to without the fear of those risks. Whilst for me as a gay man, for example, I felt like a lot of things I wanted to experience at like 18, like first boyfriend, going to a gay club and not being in fear, for example. They happened a
Sure.
lot later.
Sure.
And so being able to have natural relationships because of that was very different. And so you
Sure.
find yourself, a lot of queer people can relate to this. If you come out a bit later in life, and for me it wasn't, that much later, 25 is still young to be
It's
living
still very
authentic.
young. Yeah.
But I'm suddenly finding myself at 25 living like an 18-year-old, experiencing a lot of these things for the first time, whilst my straight friends are more settling down. They're coming
Sure.
out of the party era. I'm going into the party era. There's a lot of different moving parts that make it that only someone else in the community gets it. Only someone else can understand what you're
Can
going through
understand.
and why you need to experience those things now, because there's a sense of making up for lost time, doing things that you never got to experience from fear, and whether that was hitting the gay club 4 times a week, going on all these dates, traveling
Hmm.
to Berlin for Pride and then going to Valencia for Pride and then going to Madrid Pride. I was
Yeah.
doing everything all at once, but I would have done it at 18 if I could. So
That sounds
friendships,
exciting too.
yeah,
That's your individual story. We each have our own unique journey, but as you said in the opener, we have all been on the journey just at different times in our lives, especially as queer men.
yeah,
And I
100%.
say that now with pride. Back when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, that was shameful. I didn't even want to admit that I was gay, to be honest. I
Yeah,
knew I was different from a very early age. I think we touched upon that in the past. But especially in high school and early college, there was that fear, at least, for me. And I did get to experience a lot of that at the right time and the right age.
yeah,
And I wouldn't, I don't regret any of that because it was fun, exciting, going to the clubs, meeting men, going on whatever, right? Just living
yeah,
the
yeah,
life that I had seen on Queer as Folk or television, or then there wasn't even that much on television or in pop culture at the time because it was all shameful.
yeah.
That's society telling us that it was that it was wrong or a sin. you know, which
Yeah.
made it even worse. And it exacerbated the entire situation, I think, for all of us in different ways.
Yeah, definitely.
But is having gay friends really all that it's cracked up to be? I'm not here to be negative, but I'm like, I've experienced a lot of different queer friendships and queer working relationships. And I'm like, you know, like think emoji.
Yeah, definitely. I think that happens to a lot of us too, because like it's only been since I moved to Spain that I started to be able to live authentically. But because there was such an unpacking process for me, I feel like when I talk about circumstantial friendships, you know, I've been through many different versions of myself just in the last few years, and I'm still finding myself even now. But when I look at
Same here.
myself in, say, 2017, when I was going out to these clubs every day, the friends I had around me then, um, the version of myself that I was presenting at the time is not necessarily in line with who I am today. There's bits, but they were very much exaggerated. There's almost like a performing part to it. Like I wanted to be the confident one and have a group of gay friends around me. I don't know why, but I'd
Yes,
always felt on the peripheral of social groups with just my anxiety in general. And this was, you know, surrounded generally by my straight friends and with this group of my lesbian friends in the UK. But I suddenly being authentic for me and having my life was very immersed in the gay scene, if you want to call it that.
sure,
And I found myself, you know, naturally, I'm not really a party person, but I was. And so that came
sure.
with a lot of drinking, going out many days a week. And for my social anxiety, it would exhaust it. But to be around these different characters, I did. And I think it happens a lot, whether it's insecurity or just the people we're around, taking on traits of a lot of these people from these groups I was hanging around
Yeah.
with. And years later, when I try and connect with them again, or even last year, I remember meeting up with a friend I hadn't seen since before COVID. Nothing in common other than the memories of those
Sure,
party days, you know. And it's like
sure.
we go through different versions of ourselves along the way because as gay men, adult life is, I always talk about the layers of the onion. Our real personality traits, the things we love to do, they're always there, but they get clouded along the way. They get hidden because of fear of social shaming. They get
Sure.
hidden because of risk of rejection. So for me, I felt like a caricature. What's the word? Caricature of myself. I can never
Yes,
say
yes.
that word. And
Exactly.
so it was like very exaggerated parts of my personality through all these friendship groups. So I was the loud one, the one that overly made ridiculous jokes, got overly drunk, the cringe one.
Yes.
And really, I'm pretty quiet person that likes to go on hikes and quite boring. But I
Yeah,
was putting
that's
myself
me
front and
now.
center. Yeah, and I think looking back, there's many different versions of ourselves we go through as gay men before we get to the version we were always meant to be. And so as
Yeah.
we grow through that, a lot of those friendships don't always serve us in the present. You can look with great memories, but it may well be that someone we were besties with at 25 is just a hello in the street 10 years later.
Yeah. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, speaking from, you know, on this hit a nerve with me while you were saying the last few years, there were many different or have been many different iterations of me as well since COVID 2022 to 2025. I've changed immensely and I'm still not where I want to be exactly, but I'm feeling my most authentic self now in
Yeah,
2000
that's
April
good.
2025. And a lot of that had to do with trying too hard to find gay friends.
Yeah, I can relate. Yeah.
And even though I felt, and I don't regret any single moment of that, but it was a lesson. I think everything has to be a lesson in life and not to
Yeah.
push it. It just is what it is. I was going through, I think I had spoken about this early on in our one of our casts, losing weight, finding my voice, working through imposter syndrome for my business. working through getting back to the basics of my own long-term relationship with my partner.
Yeah.
But trying too hard to find the right gay friends.
Yeah.
And that brought on an entirely different set of problems. And my partner just admitted to me the other day, and I, admitted back, and we came to some common ground on how we had acted in this friend group a few years ago. We were always on. The mask was always on, trying too hard.
Yeah.
But there was a part of me at the time, I could speak for myself, that felt that the mask had to be on to be the dad of the group, to always provide, to always go above and beyond, because there was something in me that needed that at the time.
Yeah. Definitely.
And unfortunately, that relationship, I mean, yes, I think it served what it had to serve at the time. But after it completely got destroyed, and you heal and move on, and you're a little bit more careful going forward with your relationships or who you choose to bring into your life, again, speaking for myself, then you're like, what was really going on at the moment? And how do I curb that going forward to protect myself, but be even more authentic going forward with different gay friendships?
Yeah.
And there's so many things we can unpack, even in that sub conversation as well.
Yeah.
So it's a lot.
100%.
It's a lot.
Yeah. The thing is, there's a lot of moving parts when you're attracted to the same sex, it can get messy with friendships sometimes anyway. Like, I remember I went to Madrid with almost a sense of entitlement of, oh, I'm going to be part of the community now and build this group of friends around me. And you end up developing feelings for one that doesn't have them back, or someone you think you're friends with develops feelings for you, or you go on a night out and suddenly they're hitting on you, or jealousy. What happened with me, I had what I thought were friends that then got very jealous and went away when I got in a relationship.
Sure.
All these different friendship dynamics, they're difficult to navigate. And I think for me, I had a sort of delusional, maybe entitlement, that I would arrive in Madrid and I'd be like, okay, now I can build this group of gay queer friends around me because I've never had that, so that's what I want. And it makes me sound, I've had to forgive myself for this as the years have gone on, but there were a lot of people that I met in Madrid in that first 2 years that, straight, gay, whatever, they could have been really great friends that in the present they would be, but say looking back to the version of me at 25, 26, I wanted to be in this group, going out with these gay friends and feel almost validated, attracted to have this group around me so much that I dismissed a lot of potential in real friendships at the time, because my priority was, I have to make up for lost time. I have to go to this gay club. I want to go to this party. And there's a lot of people, potential friendships that I lost along the way through doing that. And years later, I realized that. But I think looking back, a lot of those people were in that place where they'd settled down more into the version of who they, were meant to be. They were more comfortable with themselves. And my insecurity at the time was, I moved abroad. I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to have this group around me. I wanted to try every experience, find a boyfriend, a lot of different moving parts. So friendship dynamics, they get complicated, but it meant surrounding myself with party people, fair weather friends, rather than cultivating the real relationships where you really go deep and really talk about what's going on at the time. And looking back now, that was the version of me that it was then. I couldn't change anything about it, but a lot of great people that I could have met then, and I did meet, kind of got brushed aside for these very surface friendships. And I think we've all kind of been through that stage. But for me, I felt like it was a bit of a late bloomer to having that.
I can speak I mean, literally, you bring out a lot in my memory as we speak on these, in these conversations. I was the exact same way, maybe a little bit earlier than 25, 26, because at that time I was entering the beginnings of my long-term relationship. That's not perfect, by the way. You have to compromise and grow together. Otherwise, you're at a very big loss, you know. But back, even before I started dating my current partner, same thing. I really just wanted to collect boys, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And my ego drove that bus hard. Going
Yeah,
to the club Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday with my girlfriends, with, you know, my straight girlfriends, going by myself, finding these guys on not even Facebook. It was Hot or Not or MySpace back in the day, not to date myself. But because
yeah,
I'm a social media maven, I have to bring these up. And those were ways in which
mm.
we could connect with other gay men at the time, which was exciting. And I would meet 3, 4, 5, 6 different
Yeah.
different boys at the club when I was single, and I would go dance with one and say I'd be right back, and I go dance
Yeah.
with another one, and nothing in
Yeah.
a sexual manner, just to feel the excitement of being wanted,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just to dance and drink and just really have my ego run the show.
yeah, for sure.
That was a completely different version of myself back then. I wouldn't probably even want to talk to myself, that version of me back then. It was all about, as you were saying, the ego. And I had no interest in a long-term relationship. I had no interest in building friendships with gay men. I thought I was who I was. And I did have a close-knit group of friends that came out of that eventually around that time.
Yeah,
But as you had said, you know, people can get jealous, and, you know, you may misread, you know, what the intentions are. Maybe you just wanted to be friends with somebody. I could speak to that as well. One of
yeah,
my good friends back then, I only wanted to be friends with. I was not attracted to, and he wanted more. I think that put a
yeah,
strain on the relationship. Um, and then, you know, he brought his friends into the group. I had come into the group as a newcomer at the time. We were celebrating holidays with each other and giving each other gifts. And we were like the awesome foursome. Like, nobody wanted to mess with us. And that was
yeah,
fueling the ego, fueling what I wanted at the time.
yeah,
And we had gone to a party, and a member of the group had approached another young gentleman that I was attracted to, and
yeah,
he had crossed the line.
yeah,
And that was the beginning of the end of the friend group, because then everybody dispersed and went out on their own. So, but even then, I wasn't really looking to form long-term friendships with other gay men. It was about the ego
yes,
and how many men I really could collect back then. And it's just funny how you grow and evolve, and you're like, wow, did I really do that? The answer is yes. I'm going to own up to it, forgive myself, and
yeah,
not regret a moment of it, because it was fun. So
yeah, definitely. I think what happens as well to a lot of us is there's almost that feeling, at least there was for me, and I had to hide away almost for many years when I was in the UK before I moved. So
sure.
all that time, seeing your other friends, navigating life, hookups, relationships, dating, I didn't get to experience that other than, sneaking on the train for a weekend to Manchester and then going back to my real life. So when you're suddenly immersed in it, you want to be desired, you want to be attracted to, you want to feel all the
Yes.
things you didn't get to feel. I first year in Madrid, my friends got exhausted. Like back home, I used to have my lesbian besties that I still stayed close with. And every week I'd be like, I've met the love of my life. I've met this other guy. And it would
Girl,
be a
me too.
different one.
Every week.
And then
Yeah.
they'd disappear. And I think, I just looking back, it was like you get almost intoxicated off the attention. And my life was seeking this validation where the end
Yes.
result would be a relationship to get a boyfriend at the expense of not cultivating the real friendships. Now,
Yes.
obviously, as the time has gone on, but it's changed now. Back in 10 years ago, it used to be very toxic, even on Grinder. It still is probably. I don't use the
Sure.
app
Sure.
anymore. Say Grinder, the apps, there was this mentality of you reach 30 and it's all over. Game over. No over 30s, all these things you see
Sure.
on profiles. And me at
That's
25, 26,
crazy.
yeah, and I had this fear that I was gonna be, turn 30 and have missed my shot. And
Game
because it was in a
over.
very small time frame, getting to do everything, I had
Shut
to
it
do
down.
everything. So it sounds incredibly selfish. I didn't have time to build these friendships. I was on
No.
a mission. And then my reality check was I got into a relationship and I was very unhappy because I wanted so bad to be in this relationship that then all these insecurities and things I was running away from and have
Sure.
been immersing myself in the party scene, attention to avoid, they come out in the relationship instead and ends up tanking that relationship. So
Yes.
since then, and I've dated other people since, but no serious relationships. Since the summer of 2019, I've been on this gradual layer by layer, learning more about myself. And all the people I was friends with back then, I'm not friends with now for various reasons, but it's like the people I'm meeting now, I'm in such a different place emotionally. I can be very open and vulnerable and really invest, but I was not investing that time, 6, 7
No.
years ago. It was all that focus on the high, the adrenaline of meeting someone new and the potential in that, rather than really nurturing these friendships and putting the effort in. And I think that is very easily done. I always say, and there's a new season out of Black Mirror, so I guess I'm promoting that. But
Oh, I have to watch. It comes
yeah,
out today, right? I'm so excited.
yeah, and
I'm so excited.
I always remember there was I think it was the third season, San Junipero with the lesbian
Yes.
couple. I
Yes.
said gay for me, if you get lost in the gay scene, it's a bit like that episode where you're just going out again and again.
Yes.
It's almost like a trip to San Junipero. You're chasing the high, and it's like after a while you
Oh,
get
that's
so
crazy.
lost in the
Yes.
party scene. And I was very much lost in that party scene. And then they go to that place that's a slightly darker party, like the Quagmire in it, I think it was called. And
Yes.
I've seen a lot of people go down that route, like living in
Me,
Spain, like
me too.
friendships I had at the time get consumed by that. And it was always a fear of mine as well. And then COVID happened. I think I was on that downward spiral. COVID happened to shut everything down, but I was very much adrift from real connections, real friendships, real community building. It was all these faces around me, but no one really had my back. I didn't have my own
Sure.
back either. And so it's been year after year since then, unpacking that. And there's a lot of things you learn about yourself, when there's a global pandemic and you have to sit and look at your life.
But it's true. But what you were just saying, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree, is very commendable. A lot of queer men don't take the time to reflect or
Yeah,
even to go to therapy. That, again, I think we're big proponents of getting assistance and getting the help that we need through therapy and working on ourselves to become better, stronger queer men,
yeah,
to allow ourselves to become those leaders, to then eventually bleed into the other facets of our lives. I can speak for myself,
yeah,
but that's very commendable because not everybody understands why that's so important to look in the mirror and say, what the hell are you doing? How
yeah,
can I not go down that, into that downward spiral any longer? How can I succeed and be happier with my life? How can I formulate better, stronger relationships, not only with our straight allies, but with other queer men?
yeah.
And I think with queer men, we come with a lot more, I know we come with a lot more baggage than most people.
Mm,
How are we going to
yeah,
navigate those relationships, both personal and professional?
yeah,
It's
definitely.
been very difficult for me. I'm still trying to figure that out. Because what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought I had even wanted, as I was saying, with this other group of friends that we're no longer friends with, how can I bring the positive or extract the positive aspects of that relationship or those relationships to a new group of friends? How am I going to protect myself? But also, do I still want to be the dad of the group? Do I want to become a leader? Do I want to be on the periphery and say, I'll talk to you once in a while. How do I navigate that without sounding however it's going to come out, as raw and honest and transparent as possible? But I wanted to say another thing. Well, I have a lot to say, but we only have so much time.
Yeah.
Back when I was first dating my current partner of many, many, many years, I would go back to the clubs, and those club friendships, of course, ran their course, and we would see each other once in a while, but I was focusing on my boyfriend at the time, my current partner now, all these years later. And I would get such flack in the clubs by other gay friends that I was, that were my acquaintances, my club friends. They would pull me over at the bar or start sometimes screaming at me at the clubs,
Yeah.
blaming me for choosing a relationship over going out and enjoying life.
That's hard.
That was a wake-up call for me,
Yeah.
knowing still at that point I was not really a big, important part of the gay community.
Yeah.
Knowing I didn't want to be a part of that community if that's really how people felt.
Yeah.
I don't even care if it was jealousy. I think it was obviously alcohol induced that had a big part to play in that.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to drop my boyfriend because people were telling me that I shouldn't be in a relationship.
Yeah, sure.
So that was very difficult, a big wake-up call for me in the being part of the gay community, even years after coming out.
Yeah.
Now, all these years later, my partner and I are now friends with new gay men in the area. They're older than the last group. They're more established in their relationship. They're professionals. They have a home. They have aspirations and dreams. They're more of our equals, and not that we're best friends with them by any means yet. I hope maybe that will come to fruition in the near future. But I'm taking those relationships very seriously, very slowly, to try to put that on top of what my needs and wants are as a gay man as I'm growing at the same time. So there's a lot of different moving parts there as well, because you're in your 20s, even in your 30s, you're like, I don't really know what I want. I'm not established in my career yet. I'm not willing to hide myself any longer. How is that going to translate into becoming the best or the better version? Because I think we're always evolving, of who I want to be in the future and for years to come. That's a very difficult conversation to have with yourself.
Yeah, and it's difficult as well when you realize the people around you might not necessarily have your best interests at heart. Like, it's difficult when you're so happy in a relationship, you want to be celebrating that, and instead you're met with almost resistance, like, hey, you're pulling away from the friend group type attitude. That must have been difficult to handle as well.
Yeah, it was strange. But now in hindsight, not to say who the heck I am, but I feel bad for that guy that reacted in that way, because clearly there was a problem going on inside of him.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us feel that way, because I was in the same boat, just in a different manner years ago. I think we all can relate to a story like that. But COVID hit, and hit us in many different ways across the globe. I think we all experienced that together. But as gay men, how do we come out of that? How do we utilize that to our advantage? How do we become more professional? How do we love ourselves more? How do we still battle that internalized homophobia? And then as professionals, as queer professionals, like, the two of us are, how did that affect our imposter syndrome and how we react and grow from that?
Yeah, 100%.
I think we're still going through that, and we're evolving even as we're speaking and changing that conversation.
I think we're all still unpacking as well what we went through as a collective with the global pandemic, like that traumatic experience. I don't think none of us yet quite understand the level of mental impact that period
We're not
had.
going to for a
Just
very long
having,
time.
all of our lives uprooted and so much uncertainty. And kind of like you, I've been on such a journey just in the last few years. I look at myself 5 years ago compared to now, where it's like worlds apart, but similar to you, like with a lot of the friendships I had at the time, like, they fell apart, but I think the pandemic happened, emotionally, I suddenly, because there wasn't the escapism of the party scene and that fueling me on,
Sure,
after my
sure,
relationship, and all the things that came up in that, summer of 2019, I go back out into the world, and rather than dealing with a lot of these things, I was immersing myself around whoever I could hang out with, these parties. Um, but there was a sadness about me. There wasn't the same, it was chaotic, say 2, 3 years
sure.
before when I first went to Madrid, but it was kind of fun, everything's exciting at first. It wasn't exciting. Then the pandemic hits, and I put all this expectation on these people that I was just a face to go and party and get wasted with to them. And so when some very crazy stuff happened around the end of 2020 into 2021, had a very bad experience with a guy that everyone knew in this friendship group, but they weren't a friendship group. They were people that I kind of hung out with. And as
Hmm.
things opened up, it was a lot of house parties. The clubs were closed because it was the pandemic, and this mess and all this stuff. So I
Yeah,
became angry for 2 or 3 years of just this anger that I had to go through. I had no friends, like other than my friends back home, but none in the present in Spain because of
sure.
this situation. So I had to work almost from ground zero through a lot of anger, resentment. I didn't trust anyone. Anytime I'd make a new friendship, I had a lot of fear in my life. And
Sure.
as the pandemic kind of lifted, my answer was, I'm just going to start over. I'm just going to leave. I fled Madrid, went to Barcelona, was like, no one knows me here,
Sure.
going to start completely over. And I found even when I went to Barcelona, the same problems were happening. So I had to really look at my life, my trust issues, things from childhood, relationship with my father, things I'd avoided my whole life, the situation that happened in Madrid, and unpack that. And as I slowly did that, I started to give myself more grace. And in giving myself more grace, naturally the right people started to align with me more again because I was, well, more sober, I wasn't falling out of gay clubs on the
Sure.
hunt for a
Same here.
relationship. I decided I'm just going to avoid Tinder and this whole minefield of dating in general. I need to
Sure.
work on myself. And especially the last 2 years, as I've unlocked these parts of myself, naturally more people have gravitated towards me that I feel like I have very real conversations with now and can be very open and authentic and honest. And the things that I thought I needed 5, 6 years ago, which was a group of people around me to validate myself, I don't need now, I think
No.
one thing as we get older, we learn as well is it's fine for not every friendship to have so much expectation on it. Like there can be friendships that say I don't see them and they don't see me for months, but when we catch up, it's great. There's friends that I check in every day with, but it's nothing too deep with conversations. There's friends I talk with
Sure.
all the time, and we have very deep and meaningful conversations as well.
Yes.
So it's like,
Yes.
oh, I think finding the natural rhythm to allow relationships with people to evolve as they're meant to be is a big part of our 30s and 40s. But
It is.
for me, it's definitely the journey I'm on at the moment. And, it's like when I look back, those people in Madrid, they never knew me. They knew a version of me that was, over the top and
Sure.
usually intoxicated. And
Sure.
so it's like they never really knew the sober me that's quite boring, likes to go on a hike, obsessed with pop music, and usually just graphically designing and working on stuff for this.
Yeah.
And you can probably relate as well with building your business. Like
Oh
for me,
boy.
that's become so important to my day to day because a lot of that's finding authentic stories, authentic people, connecting with people in the community, and being able
Yes,
to
yes.
have those conversations on a professional level, but also make it into my personal life as well. That's changed me, I think, as a person, in the sense that, you've seen it even on LinkedIn. I'm not afraid to be vulnerable anymore. I very much
I'm
cheerlead
not
for the
either.
community, but 2 or 3 years ago, I felt rejected by the community. But
Yes,
that was my own bias from a group
yes.
of people that were never my friends in the first
No,
place. But
no.
hindsight is, 2020.
Hindsight is, and that's a loaded number. 2020 is a
I know. I
loaded
thought I was always saying
freaking
it.
number. Like that, I
Yeah.
got chills. But I'm the same way, also giving credit where it's due. You, for me, as a professional, have a lot to do with that. I'm my most authentic self on a LinkedIn, for instance, because I'm seeing creators like you doing the exact same thing. How do I hold myself to a different standard? How do I not care as much? How do I try not to compete with the other influencers out there that I really couldn't care much about? I'm being
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
authentic right now and very raw, and
Mm,
I could not care less because this is our platform to speak about these things.
mm.
I'm not going to compete with anybody either, especially in the queer community. I'm in my own lane. I'm
Yeah.
understanding that more and more. If you don't like what I create or do, don't like it, don't share it, don't comment. I couldn't care less. I'm good.
Yeah.
But I'm also, because of my business and those who have been with me long term, like this gay couple in the Everglades in 𝐐𝐞𝐬𝐬, Florida, have taught me as well how to be more professional in my business, how to take care of other people's needs because I'm the one that's essentially running or assisting in running their business, and how to be the most authentic queer man I can be because of my business. And that's allowing me to niche it down even more to grow my business, because I'm now having, just this week, having allies that are my clients that have gay friends, gay family members, having a gay marketing manager. I'm not afraid of that anymore. I go in, I can queen out, I can joke like we're brothers or sisters.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is what you get, but I'm going to be professional the entire time.
Yeah.
Are now starting to refer me to their contacts and their clients
Yeah.
because of the authenticity. And I got on the phone, just for instance, right before our conversation today being recorded, being my most authentic self, because a woman had called me. She dropped her mask immediately. I dropped my mask immediately. And we had a very lengthy, transparent conversation about working together going forward.
Yeah.
That's where I thrive. If you could do that and change lives by being a business owner or being somebody like an ear to listen to for queer people, for straight people, for allies, then you're already a success.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
that's what I'm noticing now because of all the BS I had gone through in fighting internalized
Yeah. Definitely.
homophobia, working through my childhood trauma, which I'm still working on. That's a never ending battle.
Yeah.
Growing a business. How do I be there for myself to be success and bring in those paychecks, which is very difficult, by the way, but it's happening. And how do I become a better man going forward? Not only for my partner, for myself, for my future children, for my
Yeah.
community that I'm way more involved in now than ever. That's where I'm at now. I'd rather work in my business and become more of a homebody in my 40s than I ever was in my 20s. Those are
Yeah.
two completely different young men, worlds apart.
Yeah. Definitely. I
Worlds
think
apart.
there's
Drop the
such
mic, stop recording now.
yeah, there is such a power though with the community and being able to cultivate those relationships and the freedom as well of like being able to go in authentically and just, it's like I said before, sometimes people just get it in the community in a way that, our allies could never quite get. Because some people, I've had these comments, I know people are going to comment again in the comment section. Why don't you surround yourself with straight friends? I don't see why
Right,
you have
right.
to have these gay friends. We need to have those queer people in our lives that can only relate to where we're at, because we didn't grow up at the same rate. I've said this before. Many of us
Or
grow up in environments that are inwardly or outwardly hostile to our interests. We have to unpack that in our adult lives. That can take many, many years. You go through
sure.
those circumstantial friendships. And so when you start to come out the other side, your friends are married, you don't have much in common with your friend that's got 5 kids, you're seeing it for you can do, but it's not the same sometimes as meeting someone else who's gay, and you can talk about where
Navigating
you're
that
at in
too.
life. Like for me, connecting with someone from the community, it's like they get it, even though our experiences, are always going to be different. There's common threads that unite us. That's why it's been so important for me with the Queerness Diaries, being able to connect with these people from the community, because it came at a time when I started the podcast I felt like for the last 3, 4 years before that, people had been writing my story for me without
Sure.
getting to know what was really going on the pages. They were making their own summaries of
Same here.
chapters and assigning that to my character. And I thought, this happens so much to so many of us in the queer community. We're so used to people trying to just skim through our diaries, books, and formulate
I
their own
know.
versions of who we are. And so that's kind of one of the things that spurred me on to start the podcast. And then someone reaches out, like, I really connect with your story, and then someone else, and then you start building on LinkedIn. You know what it's like,
Sure.
a few connections, and then they start sending messages, then they become friendships. And then for me in Barcelona last year, like, I did a speech about mental health in front of 100 people last summer. I don't know how I did that with my social anxiety, but I had so much love in that room, so many friendships I've made from
That's so
that.
important,
And
Connor. Yeah.
that was amazing for like community building, and how that springboarded off that since is, there's so many relationships where I can just be very authentic now. Even on LinkedIn, like, it's not been the easiest year, transitioning back from Barcelona
Sure.
to Madrid, because the very thing I touched on before about why I left Madrid, certain person, I could not have made it through the last few years without a lot of the support that I've received. And a lot of
Sure.
that has been from the queer community, with being vulnerable, being authentic, sharing my story. And, I'm now finding the people that show up for me, for example, on LinkedIn, repost in the comments section. You always do as well. It's like there's a real team of people from our community that champion me every day,
Yes.
and I try and do it for them as well. And it's amazing the power of that connection, because you've got this group of people that they really want to see you succeed. And a lot of us are in similar circumstances, have not had the best few years. None of us have really since COVID, but there's
Sure.
like a commonality that unites us. And I think that's what community is to me. It's the importance of being able to be authentic and vulnerable, and knowing those people, they just get it. And, I've
Yeah.
shared very vulnerable moments on LinkedIn. I don't care anymore. I wore a
No, same
mask too
here.
often in the
Yeah.
past to care what that one person that's going to say, well, this is unprofessional. I'm like, buzz off.
Then you're not meant for my community or my circle or my
Yeah.
growth and evolution going forward. I'm the same exact way. You were talking about how people take or write our stories for us. I had a very vulnerable experience when I was first coming out. I didn't out myself. My partner at the time outed me back in the 90s, and I will never allow anyone to take my story or write it for me ever again. Not just because of that, not to trauma dump and say, we're going to, no, there's a lesson to be learned there, because as you were just saying, you have to always focus on building community within our community. If people are going to be championing you like you are to me, and I try to be for you, and Hunky Tops, Christian, and other people that we've brought along the way, we're all raising each other up.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, but that's authentic. That's being vulnerable. That's becoming stronger as a queer community together, because we need that now more than ever. And we
So
need to
true.
all understand that. It's not for the likes and the shares and the comments. I couldn't care less about that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
putting my work
100%.
out there, see what sticks, who's going to appreciate it and support me, and I'll do it right in return for somebody else, especially if they're part of our queer community.
Yeah. It's like you said, now more than ever, the bonds that we have to be able to have those conversations, it's so important. And there's so many places it can go for the future. We said this before, but it's like, even though we're other sides of the pond, we have this bond that we've built, just through starting
I
out
love
through
it. I love
LinkedIn.
speaking with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like this, so, so many people I've met, that it's like, eventually for me, I'm going to start to travel again. I'm going to start visiting places. And there's so many people that you can build in the community that you can, meet and cheer you on and build these relationships with. So I encourage, I know everyone's at a different point
Sure.
in their lives, but it can feel like sometimes, like it did for me 3, 4 years ago, that you're so distant from the community, but you will find a way. And I think you have to give yourself permission to go through the process of
Yeah.
unpacking those layers, and whether it's with therapy or whatever works for someone, is like you have to go through it to get to the other side. I've learned a lot of lessons in the last few years. I've had
Yeah.
to,
Many, many.
yeah, overcome a lot of. I hate that I did it, looking back, that I had this anger and rage towards the community, because it's not a good thing to say looking at where I am now. But I did 3, 4 years ago. I had such a
Sure.
hostile experience that I had to go through that period on my own before I could be a friend to people and trust people as well. And now I'm at the other
Exactly.
side. There's so much, to gain from the community. There's so much to gain from being authentic and being vulnerable. So, kind of to wrap it up from my side, I encourage anyone on that journey to just give themselves the grace to find whatever path they're on. And it might be an
Yeah.
ugly path with many dark chapters, but you will get there in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. We can't ever stop growing as individuals, as queer men, and building community. You will find your tribe, but there
Yeah.
was something inside you, I believe, Connor, and you saying that you had to experience and experiment with and get through, not to quote American Horror Story Coven, which is my favorite season, by the way. But at
Yeah.
the end, when mother and daughter were embracing each other at death's door, the only way out is through. And there's no other way about going about that, having been through that myself. There's
Yeah.
no other way out but through. And you just have to find your own peace in that and figure it out day by day. There's no other choice.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such an important lesson. And I think this has been such a great conversation as well, to be able to go there on our own authentic journeys and talk about, how it's evolved with our relationships with ourselves, and also, the community around us. And so as we finish off today, I encourage everyone else, like I said before, whatever you're going through on a personal level, if you feel like you're in the thick of it, it sounds such a cliche thing, but it will pass. And when you're at the other side, there's just
Yeah.
so much. Everything you think I think about yourself changes in your 30s from my experience. But that's not
40s in my
necessarily a bad
experience.
thing. Yeah, it's like, just for everyone who's tuned in today, I want to say a big thank you. Drop us a comment, drop us your opinion, your story, add us on LinkedIn as well. We're always happy to meet new people from the
Yeah.
community. So thank you, Joe, so much for joining me today and being so open and transparent with your own story.
Thank you. You're helping me along the way too, Connor, and we're doing this together. So thank you always for having me as well. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a great one. Always a pleasure. And for everyone who tuned in, so thanks so much. We'll be back next week. So ciao.